Chris, what is our first main topic today?
This first one comes from Greg. Hello, John. I know Multiverse of Madness wasn't your favorite MCU movie, but I loved it. And one of the biggest smiles I've had in theaters this year was seeing Patrick Stewart back on the screen as Charles Xavier. Stewart says he'd like to come back to play Charles again in the MCU. To me, this is a no-brainer. I don't think fans will accept anyone else. What do you think? Thanks.
All right. And of course, like yesterday, we did our Doctor Strange, the Multiverse of Madness open spoiler discussion. 3.5 hours of it yesterday, and that was only part one. Part two is coming out a little bit later today with Robert Meyer Burnett picking up the topics and questions, so you can hear, answers from a different perspective than just me. So keep your guys' eyes open for that. That's coming up a little bit later today. But yeah, obviously we've been talking a lot about, we're going to talk about his box office returns a little bit later. But obviously one of the things that got people really excited about this movie, I would go so far as to say the thing that got people really excited about this movie was the presence of Patrick Stewart. Because I reminded people about this on the open spoiler discussion yesterday, was that you got to remember, before that trailer came out with Patrick Stewart's voice in it, we should tell him the truth, and you see the back of his head and everything, we've been getting a lot of comments and questions in from people saying, hey, John, I don't know if it's just me, but I'm not really feeling any buzz from people about this movie, and they weren't completely wrong. And then that trailer came out, and Patrick Stewart turned the tide, to quote Gandalf. The turning of the tide came, and all of a sudden, everybody was talking about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, right? And a lot of that had to do with Patrick Stewart. People love their Pat Stew. Is that what I'm going to make that a cool thing? Pat Stew. Everybody loves the Pat Stew, and we're loving it. And a lot of people thinking we'd like to see him come back. And you know who else wouldn't mind coming back? Patrick Stewart. This is what Patrick Stewart had to say. This comes from the folks over at Screen Rant. Stewart spoke to Variety following the world premiere of the MCU sequel to discuss his decision to play the role again. At the end of the interview, Stewart is asked if there's any chance that he'll play Professor X again, and he is willing to do it. Charles Xavier? Yeah, there may be. The whole X-Men comic series is so huge, so vast, there might be an opportunity in which he comes back. We'll see. That comes to us from Screen Rant quoting Patrick Stewart. Okay, so as far as the question goes, is Patrick Stewart the only person that audiences are willing to see as Professor X? No, that's not true at all. We already know that because James McAvoy played Professor Xavier and was quite well received.
Mm-hmm. He was really good.
I mean, X-Men, I still contend that X-Men Days of Future Past is legitimately a top 10 greatest comic book film of all time.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people really loved First Class and all that kind of stuff. So we've already seen that the audience is willing to see somebody else in the role. But to hear that Patrick Stewart is willing to come back, and listen, one of the biggest pops, and you can make an argument that the biggest pop in this movie was either Patrick Stewart popping up on screen or blah, blah, blah popping up on screen. But it depends on the theater. Some theaters are saying that blah, blah, blah was the biggest pop. Some half theaters saying Patrick Stewart was the biggest pop.
There's definitely a bigger pop.
There is? Oh, I know. I get it. People who've seen the movie know what she's talking about. There was definitely a bigger pop. There was.
I've seen it. I don't know what she's talking about. I have no idea, to be honest.
I'll tell you later, Ray.
So, I mean, everybody loved seeing him on there. Loved seeing him on there. Could there be avenues and ways, particularly in a multiverse reality that is, invading the MCU, that we could theoretically see him come back? Yes. But should Patrick Stewart be Professor Charles Xavier in the new MCU moving forward? And as somebody who, to me, Professor Charles Xavier will always be Patrick Stewart. Like, to me, whenever I think of Charles Xavier, I have for the last more than 20 years, because longer, even before, because he was the ultimate fan cast of Charles Xavier.
He was.
I'd say for me, for 30 years, the only guy I have in my head for Professor Charles Xavier is Patrick Stewart. But as somebody who feels that way, that Patrick Stewart will always be my Professor X, he should not be Professor X moving forward. It is time for a new Professor X to come and take the mantle, so Kevin Feige and the folks at Marvel can tell their new story moving forward with their own Professor Charles Xavier. And again, I disagree with that sentiment that he's the only one fans will accept. I think, again, we've already seen that that's not the case. James McAvoy was well received. I think another actor can be well received. So have him pop up one or two more times in a quick cameo sort of special multiversal role. Yeah, I can see that. But he's not Professor Charles Xavier anymore. And so it's time to have somebody else. Anyway, Chris, you hear this. I mean, obviously the great Pat Stew is willing to come back. Quit trying to make Pat Stew a thing. Anyway.
We're making it a thing.
I'm trying to make it a thing
Stew.
here. With Patrick Stewart saying that he'd totally be open to coming back. Do you see that? And what do you think about our viewers' idea that like he's really the only guy to play Professor X? What do you think?
Well, it comes back to this idea that we talk about a lot on this show, right? An actor wants to be in Marvel? Ooh.
What?
That's wild.
11.
They hate money. So it makes sense.
I think actors hate it's money.
We hate it so much. God,
You know what
please.
working cures?
Only pay us in credit
Poverty.
and exposure. So that in itself is just, of course, he'd want to come back. And this is a character that he loves playing. He played this character with one of his best friends in the entire world for years, too.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that's enticing as well. But I do think that it is time to move on. I think it was Elizabeth Gerardo who wrote in and was just like, if I have to keep seeing things happen to Patrick Stewart and like I have to keep seeing him come back in. And I think we are ready to move on. James McAvoy proved that you can have somebody else in the role and do it really, really well. And to a degree, I do think he was playing Patrick Stewart. He was doing a really, really great job embodying the same character that we all knew and loved. And that's what it's about, though, making a role your own. I'm a Whovian, and my doctor, my gateway drug to that show was David Tennant. And when people were talking about, well, we should just bring David Tennant back to be the doctor again. No. Why would you do that? It's time to move on sometimes. Let somebody else do the role. Have somebody else try their own version of it, because that's what keeps storytelling fresh, is when we take something that we love and we explore new avenues with it.
I think they made a great choice this weekend for
I'm
the new
so
doctor.
excited about it.
If you
He's
watch
incredible on
Sex
Sex Education.
he's so good.
Yeah.
I have no idea what we're talking about, so that's okay. Anyway, Rob, what do you think about this whole Patrick Stewart situation?
Well, look, I think that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has already kind of told us. I mean, the same way that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are now in the MCU from their alternate universes, I think that our Patrick Stewart should be relegated to alternate universes. The MCU, our MCU, the 616 universe, deserves to have its own all-new X-Men, I think. Because otherwise, it's you're begging and borrowing from other universes and other franchises. I like what they've done. I like that they've now set up that, okay, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, those are real and they existed out there in the multiverse, which means that the Fox X-Men universe is also part of a multiverse.
or can.
Be,
Yeah.
but not our universe. Because I'm really looking forward to seeing a new incarnation of the X-Men through the prism of what Kevin Feige, Louis D'Esposito, and Victoria Alonso have done at Marvel. And the thing is, they already know what they're doing. Like you always point out, Kevin Feige said 5 years.
Yeah, and here
It's
we
been
are.
more than 5 years. They know, and I think it's going to be exciting. Whatever they do, it's going to be exciting and worth watching. And I for one am there for it. And Patrick Stewart, I love Patrick Stewart, but the guy's in his 80s now. I mean, he went out so beautifully in Logan.
Yeah,
I mean, that
yeah, it was-
movie was so wonderful. And I keep bringing people back once they've done. How many people get a swan song like Logan? Let's leave it in the past. He was great in Doctor Strange. It was really cool, but it was a multiverse, and he's dead.
So here's the thing. And I wish we could beep out what you just said. But anyway, yes. So anyway, guys, question is for you.
I mean, I meant that in Logan.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
of course.
Professor X died in Logan.
Yeah, that's what you meant.
Yeah,
It's totally not what you were talking about at the moment, but sure.
but he died.
Yes, he did. Anyway, guys,
So did Wolverine.
question is for you. What do you think about this? I mean, look, if you're like, and the audience I was with both times that I saw this movie, when Professor Charles Xavier pops up on the screen, like the response is clearly enormous. There is a huge lot of love there. But do you think maybe Kevin Feige should look at Patrick Stewart being the new, repeat, but new Professor Charles Xavier? Shit, it's time to move on. Maybe just have him come back as some cameos. Whatever you guys think, jump down into the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. Hey guys, we want to take a second to thank a sponsor of today's video, HelloFresh. Now, Ann and I were both working professionals, so sometimes making delicious and nutritious meals can sometimes be very time constraining on us. And that is why we love HelloFresh. HelloFresh makes having delicious and nutritious meals fun, easy, and it saves us time and money. With HelloFresh, you get farm-fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable, and that's why it's America's #1 meal kit. And listen, HelloFresh is 72% cheaper than dining at a restaurant, and it's even cheaper than grocery shopping. That's money back in your pocket. HelloFresh has fit and wholesome recipes for satisfying and nutritious meals that you can feel good about, with 6 recipes per week to choose from, including low-calorie and carb-conscious options. So right now, guys, go to HelloFresh.com/Campea16 and use the code Campea16 for up to 16 free meals and 3 free gifts. Once again, that's HelloFresh.com/Campea16. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit.